I will turn first to Mr Mckinnon's case. I should explain to the House that the statutory process under the Extradition Act 2003 has long ended. Since I came into office, the sole issue on which I have been required to make a decision is whether Mr Mckinnon's extradition to the United States would breach his human rights. Mr Mckinnon is accused of serious crimes, but there is also no doubt that he is seriously ill. He has Asperger's syndrome and suffers from depressive illness. The legal question before me is now whether the extent of that illness is sufficient to preclude extradition. As the House would expect, I have very carefully considered the representations made on Mr Mckinnon's behalf, including from a number of clinicians. I have obtained my own medical advice from practitioners recommended to me by the Chief Medical Officer, and I have taken extensive legal advice. After careful consideration of all of the relevant material, I have concluded that Mr Mckinnon's extradition would give rise to such a high risk of him ending his life that a decision to extradite would be incompatible with Mr Mckinnon's human rights. I have therefore withdrawn the extradition order against Mr Mckinnon. It will now be for the Director of Public Prosecutions to decide whether Mr Mckinnon has a case to answer in a UK court. This has been a difficult and exceptional case, and I would like to pay tribute to all of the Home Office officials and lawyers who have worked on this case over the years.
Let's get straight back to our breaking news for you here on RT. Britain, Gary Mckinnon, who's accused of hacking into the Pentagon, will stay in the UK after his extradition to the US was blocked. Let's now talk to RT's Polly Boyker, who's standing by for us live in London. Joining us now live. Polly, good to see you. The extradition has been blocked. What is next for Gary Mckinnon?
Yes, well, waterboarding of the mind. That's what Gary Mckinnon's mother has called the 11-year wait to know what's going to happen to her son. The experience of waiting all that time from when he was arrested back in 2002 for hacking into US military computers. All that time, the US has wanted him to go on trial there, where he could face a potentially 60-year sentence. Now, it's a massive sigh of relief for Mckinnon. He now knows that he's not facing extradition. Theresa May said that it would be because of it would be a breach of his human rights to send him there, because Gary Mckinnon, as many now know, he is mentally ill and he would be at a massive risk of suicide if he were to go to the States. Now, there's been a strong line of pressure from the United States to send him over, so this is very much a difficult decision for the Home Secretary that she had to make today. However, she has now made it. It now means that Gary Mckinnon stays in the UK, and prosecutors here are going to decide whether or not he should face trial in the UK.
Well, certainly, Polly, you talk about the tough decision for the British Home Secretary there. Not exactly a kowtowing to what some say is the bullying weight that comes out of Capitol Hill, of course, in Washington, D.C. You know, she's also said, though, that the Secretary there to commission a review, ultimately, of extradition laws themselves. Any changes we can expect, Polly?
Yes, so it's a wider repercussion from the decision on Gary Mckinnon today that's interesting to a lot of observers, because a lot of people in the UK have spoken for a long time now about how unbalanced and unfair the UK-US extradition treaty is. It's seen 9 times more Britons go over to the US in the past 10 years than UK citizens come back to than US citizens, come over to the UK to be tried. So what the Home Secretary has suggested is that there is now going to be a forum bar for anybody who's wanted by the United States. That means, in plain terms, it means that anybody wanted by the US is going to first have a hearing in the UK, where judges will decide whether or not it's fair to send a suspect over to the States.
All right, RT's Polly Boyker there live in London. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chicago for the help that you can bring. yourself down, there's something for you here. Won't you please stand up in London for our lives? Don't ask Jack to help you, cause he'll turn the other ear. Won't you please stand up in London and join us side by side? We can change the world. We abolish the world. It's time. If you believe in justice, time. When you believe in freedom, time. Stand up for human rights, time. Make a world we can believe in. Open up the door. Somehow people must be free, so help the day come soon. Won't you please come from Chicago, show your face. From the bottom of the ocean to the mountains of the moon. Won't you please stand up in London? No one else can take your place. You can change the world. Rearrange the world. It's dying. It's dying. We can change the world. Rearrange the world. We can change the world. Rearrange the world. You can change the world.
Now, the Gary Mckinnon case raises a number of issues, and anybody who looks at this must be sympathetic to someone who suffers from Asperger's syndrome. However, there are court cases pending at the moment, one challenging the Director of Public Prosecution for his judgment, and I think we've got to wait for the outcome of these court cases.
These folders were full of images in a proprietary NASA format, or in a format I'd never seen before, no JPEGs or GIFs. They're also 200 to 300 megabytes in size, and being on a 56k dial-up modem, there's no way I was going to download it. It's like 5 minutes per megabyte. So what I did, the remote control program that gives you graphical control of the machine, turned the resolution right down, turned it down to I think 4-bit colour. and then on the desktop of the NAS machine, navigated to the folder, double-clicked on the first image. The application launches, the image comes up on the screen, but it's still very, very slow. And what I saw, I was hoping to see exactly what she was describing, sort of very definite imagery. And what instead I saw was, I assume it was the Earth, which was in sort of shades of grey, but you had the Earth's hemisphere, sitting about 2/3 of the screen, and then halfway between the top of the hemisphere and the bottom of the picture, there was a classic sort of cigar-shaped object, but with sort of gold border with gingerly domes above, below, this side, actually the other side as well, so the left and right as well, and with very slightly flattened cigar ends. No seams, no rivets, no sort of telemetry or antennae or anything like that, and it just had a feeling of not being man-made. There was none of the sort of signs of man.
So in essence it was a craft, is what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. President, Tom Bradby, ITV News. Quite a lot of people in the UK feel that your determination as a country to continue to push for the extradition of computer hacker and Asperger sufferer Gary Mckinnon is disproportionate and somewhat harsh. Do you think it is time now to consider some leniency in this case? And Prime Minister, you've expressed very strong views on this matter, suggesting that Mr. Mckinnon shouldn't be extradited. Your Deputy Prime Minister has expressed even stronger views. Did you discuss that with the President today? And if not, would now be a good moment to share your views with us once again?
Please, go ahead.
Can you tell me what else you found? Because I know that you have something, have some information in regard to non-terrestrial officers. Is that right?
Yeah. There was an Excel spreadsheet, and the title was non-terrestrial officers, and it had names, ranks. Wasn't a long list, didn't even fill the whole screen, I think.
Well, could you just generally say how many? I mean, if you were to guess, are we talking 20, 50?
20. Maybe 30.
Did you notice if they were male or female by chance?
There's a discussion going on between the British and the Americans about this, and I don't want to prejudice those discussions. We completely understand that Gary Mckinnon stands accused of a very important and significant crime in terms of hacking into vital databases, and nobody denies that that is an important crime that has to be considered. But I have had conversations with the US ambassador, as well as raising it today with the President about this issue, and I hope a way through can be found.
Well, one of the things that David and I discussed was the increasing challenge that we're going to face as a consequence of the Internet, and the need for us to cooperate extensively on issues of cybersecurity. We had a brief discussion about the fact that although there may still be efforts to send in spies and try to obtain state secrets through traditional Cold War methods, the truth of the matter is these days where we're going to see enormous amounts of vulnerability when it comes to information is going to be through these kind of breaches in our information system.
computer analyst Gary Mckinnon is due to be extradited to the United States after losing his appeal at the European Court. Gary is accused of hacking into 97 military and NASA computers and deleting files. He says many people were doing the same thing, that there were a lack of passwords and firewalls, and he denies deleting any files or doing any damage. Gary was recently diagnosed with Asperger syndrome and has been suffering heart problems. His legal team are appealing to the Home Secretary Jackie Smith to halt the extradition. His family and friends have been protesting outside the Home Office.
The whole might of the US government against one guy who was looking for the thrill of hacking into something. He wasn't trying to bring down the American government.
They're using Gary as a scapegoat. Throwing 60 years at him. I mean, good God, murderers don't get as much as that.
Be very, very careful about what the authorities tell you.
It's just soul-destroying to think that he's going to spend the rest of his life. He could spend the rest of his life in America, in a prison.
Free Gary! Free Gary! Free Gary!
So we're here with Gary Mckinnon's girlfriend, Lucy. Lucy, what's going on here today?
We're protesting against the extradition of Gary Mckinnon. This is a treaty, a one-sided treaty between the UK and the US. It's only been signed by the UK, it hasn't even been signed by the US, so I don't even know if that makes it legal. But at the moment, we're fighting for Gary to stay here and be trialled here in the UK.
What's his argument against being extradited?
60 years they're threatening him with if he goes to America. They will put him in a high detention security prison. He will have no rights when he's over there. We won't be, we don't even know if we're able to visit him. And it's for the rest of his life. It's a life sentence.
So what was Gary looking for when he went onto those websites?
Evidence of UFOs and free energy.
And did he have much difficulty when he went onto the websites getting in? I mean, he's supposed to be the greatest hacker of all time.
There's the administration, they didn't set passwords, so it was an open door.
Were there no passwords whatsoever?
I think there was a few, but I wasn't with Gary, he was with a different lady at the time, so I don't know exactly what happened, but as I'm aware, there was some passwords, but a majority of them didn't. There were no passwords set up and no firewalls.
No firewalls either?
No.
OK, so what happened when, because first of all he took his case to the High Court. What happened to the High Court?
They threw it back and said they didn't want to deal with it. It had to go to the Home Office. The Home Office then threw it back to the magistrates. The magistrates then said we don't want to deal with it. We managed to get to the House of Lords and they didn't want to deal with it. They said no, so we then went to Europe and again they didn't want to know about it. So we're back again at the Home Office.
Now, I understand that there was a point where the American administration offered some sort of, was it plea bargain?
Yes, but they wouldn't put it in writing. So Gary was not going to agree to anything unless he had it in writing.
And did they go through his lawyers to do this or directly to Gary?
I think they went through his lawyers, yeah.
But is it not illegal to plea bargain in this country?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think we do plea bargaining over here. I know that's how they do their law, do their stuff over there.
So why have they turned down Gary's extradition appeal when they have claimed human rights in other cases?
Well, let's ask Jackie Smith that, shall we?
Did you actually think that you would get justice? Did you believe that?
Yeah. I mean, it's the UK and we really thought that they'd stand up for their own citizens. But obviously not.
Have you had any support at all from kind of the powers that be?
No.
Nobody at all?
Everybody's keeping their mouth shut.
Is it worth having a personal meeting with Jackie Smith?
That would be lovely. I would love to have a meeting with her and be able to, the letter that we're handing in today is a character reference as well. And if she had the chance to meet Gary, I'm sure she'd have very different views.
Now, do you think if you could put yourself in the shoes of the American administration and they have somebody hacking into their system, so they say, that they don't know about Gary, they don't know who Gary is, they don't know if he's a nice guy, they don't know if he's, really, out there to do some harm. If you were in their shoes, what would you tell them to do, or how would you approach it?
Well, I think, somebody has to take responsibility with the administration here who deal with the computers over at the Pentagon and everywhere else. Nobody's taking responsibility, and they're using Gary as a scapegoat. And, throwing 60 years at him, I mean, good God, murderers don't get as much as that. The sentence is way too high.
So this is a security issue, really? You think they're bouncing the blame onto Gary?
Yes, definitely.
How much time do you think he spent actually trying to find the UFO information?
Again, that was before my time. I don't know. Yeah, I've only been with Gary for 3.5 years, and this happened, 3 years before I met him.
So this has been a very, very long, ongoing case.
Yes. I mean,
why do you think it's dragged on so long?
I don't think anybody wants to take responsibility in this country of sending him over there. No one wants to put their hands up and say, yeah, we'll just send him over there and take the blame. I don't know why they're back and forthing it. I mean, the poor guy is in pieces. How long can his nerves take all of this as well?
I understand he has a heart condition. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was last year. He started getting really bad pains in his chest. And we went and had some tests and everything. He was getting palpitations. So he's taking it easy. Nothing was diagnosed with his heart. But every day he wakes up clutching his chest and just... a wave of fear just comes over him the minute he opens his eyes.
So he's actually not really fit to fly then?
Well, I don't think so, no.
He was also recently diagnosed with Asperger's. Now, how did that information come to light?
Somebody emailed Gary's mother and said, have you, looked into this? So we did it. Gary's mother did some research, and we got a chap to, look at Gary and assess him and assess everyone in his life, myself and his parents. And he came up with, that conclusion that he does suffer from Asperger's.
And how recently was the diagnosis?
This was a couple of weeks ago, but everybody who knows Gary has always thought that he's probably suffered from some kind of, autism because of the way that he, channels his energy into certain things. So, but none of us really knew about Asperger's until this all came to light.
So really, this could have been an obsessive compulsion to do this?
Definitely. You don't sit... I mean, apparently he'd sit there for days on end, he'd in his dressing gown just tapping away. He became totally obsessed, and that's not healthy. He completely switched off from all of his friends. He wasn't eating. To me, that is a mental disorder,
So I understand you've also been approached by some people who represent people who have Asperger's, who have also been people that have been, I don't know if you would say hackers or whether just computer, what would you call them? Computer enthusiasts.
I personally, I've had a few emails and, a few conversations, but again, Janice's mum has been campaigning since day one, so she's really dealt with most of the publicity.
But do you think that you might, if there are some people that deal with these kind of cases, are they likely to get involved in the case at this stage?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, people are, at the last 48 hours, people are coming out, and wanting to speak to Gary's mother and to the solicitors. So I know behind the scenes they're talking with these groups.
So where's the next step?
We need somebody to speak up from the Home Office, and we need it to be positive, obviously. Otherwise, they can come and get him at any point, any moment now.
So you don't know how long he's got?
No.
And what is this doing to yourself and to his mum and to his dad and his family?
For a start, it's just destroyed our lives. We're all suffering from nerves, anxiety. We're all absolutely distraught. This guy is a lovely, warm. He's a smashing bloke, and he's friends with everybody. It's just soul destroying to think that he's going to spend the rest of his life. He could spend the rest of his life in America, in a prison.
How do you think they're able to portray him as the greatest hacker of all time when he says that there were other people on the site at the same time?
It's laughable that, I don't know who made up that quote, but, he's not the greatest hacker of all time. He never wanted to be. He's not proud of what he's done. He's not in it for the glory. He's just fighting for his survival at the moment.
But he was aware of other people being on those sites?
Yeah, China was in there at the same time, Russia, but unfortunately Gary, got lazy and got caught.
I think it's terrible what the British government has done, making this extradition deal with the US government. I was at Horseferry Magistrates Court when the Americans first came and asked for him for the extradition trial. And you could even tell that the magistrate was disgusted by, the magistrate was disgusted that they had no need to present any evidence to him. And everybody was just shocked. You know, normally you would want a case to put forward to that a man could answer, right? But in this case, because the US government and the British government has made a deal after being embarrassed. That's what it's about. It's the US government being embarrassed at the absolutely shocking lacks of security that they have in their own Department of Defence. And because of that, because Gary has shown it up by what he did, then they're embarrassed and they are taking it out they're using a sledgehammer to crack a very small nut. The whole might of the US government against one guy who was looking for just the thrill of hacking into something. He wasn't trying to bring down the American government. He wasn't trying to make more, to cause more trouble and cause another 9/11. He was just investigating. He was just curious, and they are bringing the full might of the US government to bear on the British government to make them do this. It's an absolute disgrace, and the Labour Party should be ashamed of themselves. Gordon Brown should be ashamed of themselves. We're standing out here shouting at Jackie Smith, but it wasn't Jackie Smith who was in the Home Office when it was done. Right, I can't remember who it was. It might even have been Jack Straw at the beginning. I can't remember who the original Home Secretary was. But the Labour Party should be ashamed of themselves for doing this. It's completely against everything that they say they stood for when they were fighting Thatcher and fighting the Tories for 17, 18 years.
What would you say if they said, well, he left messages on the website? What would you say to that?
Well, they weren't messages from bin Laden or messages from Al Qaeda. You know, there were messages from a guy who was looking for pictures of aliens. There were messages from a guy who was sitting at home, staring at a computer for years, just playing himself, basically. Right? I come back to it once again. It's just far too much strength and far too much heavy government coming down on one guy. Do him here. You know, if you want him, he was charged here originally, right? And then they didn't bring a case. The British government dropped it. For 2 years, we didn't hear a single thing about it, right? And then all of a sudden, the Americans, some newly elected DA in West Virginia or wherever he is, decided, oh, I'm going to get my little bit of 9/11 on my CV so that I can charge someone who has attacked Homeland Security, right? It's purely political, purely revenge.
But they could argue they didn't know it was somebody just looking for UFO stuff, and that if he left messages, then perhaps they were afraid of what he might do.
By the time the American government brought the charges and started the extradition procedures, they knew all that, because the British government, they had this bunch, the Home Office and the Met, they had investigated it. They had found out what he was up to. They had them talking to him about it, right? So the idea that the American government suddenly discovered this, that they thought that, now we're in big trouble, that people are hacking in. I guarantee you that more dangerous hackers, Chinese government hackers, Russian government hackers, have got through into the Department of Defence in America. And I'm sure that the Americans have done it back to them, right? But here was a guy who didn't do anything, merely showed up how bad their security was. Open terminals, people not switching off their terminals, people not having a password, just a default system, so that he could get through them.
So why did they pick on Gary rather than some real
You would
threat?
have to ask, mere political I would say, but you would have to ask the DA out of West Virginia, who's bringing, I think it's West Virginia who are bringing the charges against them. Because I cannot see past the fact that it must have been a political decision, political coercion. They're picking up. We're picking up people. The Americans are saying we're picking up people who we think might be involved in trying to blow things up and trying to start another 9/11. What we need is someone who's into computers. We have to get this cyber danger. You know, it's just another way of scaring the American people. Get more budget for their homeland security system and just be trying to scare people. It's absolutely nonsense.
So how long have you actually been involved in supporting Gary?
Oh, I've been a friend of Gary's for, oh my goodness, I'd have to check with Ben. I've been a friend of Gary's since about 1989. I first met him in 1989. I've been friends with him. I helped him out when he first got charged and he had to leave his home. I've been to most of his extradition stuff at Hosbury Magistrates Court before they closed that. But unfortunately, I haven't been able to do so much because I got a new job, and that's stopping me from coming and doing so much with him. But I had to come down to this. There was no way I was going to miss this. A long time I've supported Gary. A long, long time. And I will continue to support him. And if I could get the money, then if they decide to if they are going to send them back, and they eventually do send them back, then I would love to go and visit him so that he knows that he's not sitting there. He has no family in America, none whatsoever. And I fear for his mind if he gets sent to America. Have you seen him since the European Court hearing? No, I haven't. I've been, for my sins, I've been on holiday. I work in the education system, so I'm fortunate enough to get decent enough holidays, and I've been away while it was done. But I was keeping in contact, and I did know it was going on. I was shocked, and I would love to read the explanation that the House of Lords came up with for refusing to allow him to appeal to the European Human Rights Court. I would love to know what the reason for that is. I haven't read it yet because I'm not even on the computer. I'm not even internet savvy, so I haven't been. I'm sure it's probably on his website, but I haven't been able to get onto that because I'm not into computers. I don't have one in the house. So I'm sure I will get someone to print it off for me and read it. Have you got other examples of cases where people haven't been extradited that you could tell us about? I don't think, as far as I know, everyone that has been asked to be extradited has been extradited. I seem to remember, I can't remember any names, but I seem to remember that there were at least 2 other cases going on at the same time when Gary was at Hosbury Magistrates Court. But I genuinely don't know what happened to there. I doubt very much if they've been successful, because I think that the nature of the agreement which the British government has made with the American government just makes it virtually impossible for the British justice system to turn down an application for extradition. So I fear that anybody, the Americans come in and asking for anybody, then they'll probably get them. Did he plead human rights issues? I think well, the nature of the extradition process, he couldn't. Because he couldn't defend himself in any way, shape or form. He did say it at the Magistrates Court, and his lawyers did say that when he was interviewed by the Americans, they said they threatened to fry him. If he wouldn't cut a deal with them, then they would bring the full might of the American legal system against him, and he could be facing, and they used the word fry him, right, to him and to his lawyer, I understand. So by that, you take it to mean that they're threatening him with execution? Well, they were, yes, but they were using it as a threat. There was no way that the charges that were being brought against him, that would have been the outcome. They were simply using it to try and scare the living daylights out of him, to make a deal with him. But he refused to make a deal, and I think it was something like, you come over to America, say that you did it, own up, plead guilty, and we will, I think it was, originally it was something like 18 months, you can do 6 months with us, and then you can come back and you can serve the rest of it here, right?
Didn't they say the New Jersey prosecutors would be happy to see him fry? Wasn't that the actual wording?
Well, he was being threatened with being executed. Now, it was merely a threat, right?
The way I heard it was that, and as I understand it, there is no death penalty in New Jersey now.
Well, as far as I understand it, there is no death penalty for the charges that are being brought against him. So it was merely to try and intimidate him and bully him into making the deal with them that they wanted, right? But he turned it down, and here we are almost at the end of the process.
Didn't they deny afterwards that they did that?
As far as I understand, they have denied that.
The approach was made through the lawyers?
As far as I know, it was American lawyers who were interviewing him at the time, as far as I know. I would imagine that his lawyer was there at the time as well, because I doubt very much if he was interviewed, hopefully he wasn't interviewed by the American legal representatives, without his own legal representatives present.
Have you yourself written to Jackie Smith?
I'll read it for you. It says, "Please halt the extradition of Gary Mckinnon to the United States. Gary is a British citizen who deserves a fair, unbiased trial for crimes allegedly committed on UK soil. He has been vilified and accused of acts of terrorism in the US. He will not get justice there. The UK-US 2004 extradition treaty was introduced after his initial arrest by British police, requires the US government to produce no evidence against him, and this is non-reciprocal. Do not be the woman who allows such a dangerous legal precedent to be set. Act now to ensure Gary Mckinnon faces true justice in a UK court." Signed by anybody who's at all interested in signing it. Okay?
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
UK trial or no trial?
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 My name's Noel Glynn, and I'm working primarily with the 9/11 Truth Movement. But I'm supporting Gary because I think so many appalling violations of civil liberties have come out of the 9/11 incidents and the 9/11 lies.
So have you been supporting Gary for long, or have you just joined in the recent weeks?
Well, I've been in correspondence with his mum for probably the past year, on and off.
Okay. Have you met Gary?
I've never met him.
Did you expect the verdict that's happened, or did you actually think that perhaps when it got to the European Court or the House of Lords that would be it?
Well, I hoped that he would find some justice there, but I wasn't too hopeful because I was aware of the inequity of the extradition treaty that was non-reciprocal, that was signed by David Blunkett, without apparent reference to Parliament in the first place, and which allows the US to extradite citizens from this country without presenting evidence, but does not give the British government the same rights to extradite people from the US. And I think it's appalling anyway that anyone should be extradited from a country without evidence being presented.
What do you think should happen to Gary?
I think he's basically been doing something harmless, and I don't think any charges should be brought against him at all.
But if it was your computer system and you worked in defence, would you not feel that was a violation of your computer system?
I probably would, but then I would probably also have a guilty conscience for not having set up proper security, proper passwords and things, so that hackers could not get in. And I believe that the security was very lax, or so I have been told.
Isn't it easy to be in sympathy when we know people, and then maybe if you're on the other side of the pond and you're thinking that this is some dangerous person and they're leaving messages, that maybe they would think, oh, you know, this guy, we better stop him because he might really, you know, because they're saying that he took down about 70 computers. I don't know if he really did or not, but do you think that they ought to be concerned about that kind of thing, or do you think it's their own security? Should they be looking closer to home?
Do I think that the US government ought to be worried about hackers? Yes, I'm sure they should, but then it's up to them to protect their systems, not to persecute foreigners who are on the lookout for information which the public as a whole ought to be made aware of. I gather he was looking for UFOs. If there are UFOs, then we ought to know about it, and the government should not be keeping secrets. I have also heard a story that he planted on one of the Pentagon's computers the slogan, 9/11 was an inside job. I don't know whether that story is true, but if it is, it may mean that there are a lot of people somewhere within the US administration that are very worried about what they think he might know.
I don't think they were the exact words he used, but he did mention 9/11. Yes.
Right.
Now, what do you think the UK government should do in a circumstance like this? I mean, obviously they can't be seen to just say, oh, well, you know, he's one of ours, therefore leave him alone. But, you know, what should they do? Because obviously they have to be seen to do something.
Well, I'm not really in a position of speaking for the UK government. I think they shouldn't have signed this treaty in the first place. And now that they've done it, they have to take the consequences, presumably, either of great embarrassment and saying, oops, we signed something that is unpopular with the public, and it should be unpopular with the public, and revoking the treaty. I would like to see the treaty revoked.
If it hasn't been signed by the other side, is it not ratified, surely?
I'm not a legal expert and I can't really answer that question.
OK, so on behalf of the 9/11 Truth Movement, is there something you'd like to say to the people of the world?
Be very, very careful about what the authorities tell you, and always ask the awkward questions and keep asking, because there's a lot of people in government who are trying to hide things and they will try and fob you off. And when they get caught out, as they may be have got caught out in some degree in Gary's case, they are liable to come down like a ton of bricks on ordinary people. And it's a disgrace, quite frankly. It's a violation of civil liberties. Actually, you asked me earlier whether I was sympathetic with this case simply because I knew Gary. But I don't know Gary. It's a civil liberties issue, and it's one that we ought to be getting excited about, whether we know Gary or not.
Do you think this could be anybody's son or daughter?
Of course. I mean, it comes back to that old Pastor Niemöller poem, doesn't it? About first they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't protest. And now I think we ought to add a new line, which is, and then they came for the hackers, but I wasn't a hacker, so I didn't trouble to do anything. And then they came for the Muslims, but I wasn't a Muslim, so I didn't protest at that. And then they came for me, and there was nobody left to protest.
No way to the USA! Gary stays in the UK! 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 No way to the USA! 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 No way to the USA!
Jackie Smith has been receiving letters from the public urging her to allow Gary to be tried in the UK. He could be extradited any day now, and only her decision can stop that. This has been Maz for Anarchy on the Airwaves in London.
Here's your list of charges. You hacked into the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Department of Defence and NASA, amongst other things. Why?
I was in search of suppressed technology, you know, laughingly referred to as UFO technology. I think it's the biggest kept secret in the world because of its comic value. But it's a very important thing. We've got old age pensioners can't pay their fuel bills. We've got countries being invaded to award oil contracts to the West. And meanwhile, secretive parts of the secret government are sitting on suppressed technology for free energy.
So how did you go about trying to find the stuff that you were looking for in NASA, in the Department of Defense?
Well, I assumed that although it's part of a secret government project, there must be military ties. I'd read 400 expert witness testimonies, ranging from civilian air traffic controllers through military radar operators, all the way up to guys that were in charge of whether or not to launch nuclear missiles. So some very credible people. All of these people had said that there are UFOs, they are alien. We're using anti-gravity and reverse engineered technology that came from captured UFO craft.
We're using anti-gravity?
Yeah.
Right now? Who's using anti-gravity?
Secret compartmented parts of the government. And I think we're being trickle-fed by the various defence contractors, so that I predict within the next 7 years we will have anti-gravity as a publicly usable phenomena.
Okay, so how did you go about hacking into the computers to find what you were looking for?
Well, unlike the press would have you believe, it wasn't very clever. I searched for blank passwords. I wrote a tiny Perl script, the Perl language, that tied together other people's programs that searched for blank passwords, so you could scan 65,000 machines in just over 8 minutes.
So you went and actually accessed 65,000 machines sitting on, I guess, 65,000 desks in different buildings?
No, because all 65,000 aren't necessarily live yet. You might find typically 5,000 might be live, and out of that 500 might be Windows machines, then 50 might have blank administrator passwords, which is a pretty bad ratio for the world's largest military.
So you're saying that you found computers which had a high-ranking status, administrator status,
yep,
which hadn't had their passwords set, they were still set to default?
Yeah, precisely. And in some cases it was thousands of machines, because they had an image. Rather than install Windows off a CD at every machine, you blat it onto an image, stick the image in all the machines, and every single machine has a blank local administrator password. So.
And you actually eventually took control of one particular machine on a desk somewhere in NASA, is that right?
Well, I mean, I had control of every machine that had a blank administrator password, because the door was open. So.
And what did you use that to do?
I was searching for files and evidence in relation to the UFO question.
Okay. Were you the only hacker to make it in, past the slightly lower than expected lines of defence?
Yeah, exactly. There were no lines of defence. There was a permanent tendency of foreign hackers. You could run a command when you're on the machine that showed connections from all over the world, check the IP address to see if it was another military base or whatever, and it wasn't. The General Accounting Office in America has again published another damning report saying that federal security is very, very poor.
So let's get this straight. While you were on a machine inside one of these computers in the Department of Defence, say, there were other hackers logged onto that machine as well, from around the world?
Yeah, you run your netstack command, and you see the list, Turkey, Germany, Holland, everywhere.
Are they all being prosecuted?
No, because they weren't caught. I'm assuming. I mean, they could have turned out later on to be someone else that's been caught, but not as far as I know. I think that probably, because the security was so poor, it's probably foreign governments.
How many times did you go back into this computer within NASA and the Department of Defence? Was it a one-time only?
No, I mean, most computers, because I maintained a quiet presence and wasn't running around causing abundant damage, as is claimed. I was back on most computers for as long as it took for me to find out if there was any information on there which would be useful to
So how many times do you think you went? Over what kind of period were you hacking into these computers? Was it a one-time only? Was it for the course of a week?
A couple of years.
And you went unnoticed for a couple of years?
Oh yeah, yeah.
What if I was, say, a NASA employee and I was walking past the computer that you were connected to? What would I have seen on the screen? Would there be any clues to anyone that was there?
Absolutely.
That you were there?
Yeah, I was using something a bit like PC Anywhere, called Remotely Anywhere, so I could actually see the desktop of the machine I had control of. And if you were walking past there, you would see the mouse move and me doing whatever I was doing on that desktop.
Why weren't you spotted then?
I was eventually, and it was at NASA. I was spotted. I even saw the chap's or woman's mouse cursor come down, right-click the local area network icon and choose disconnect, and that was me.
So someone basically took the mouse off you, if you like, and
in a way,
cut the connection.
Yeah.
Why did it take 2 years before they caught you? Do you think there was no one there at the computer, or did they...
yeah, because I used to be careful about the hours.
So you would log on in the middle of the night, say?
Yeah, you had to always be juggling like different time zones and stuff. And yeah, so you're doing it at night time, so hopefully there's not many people around. But there was one occasion where a network engineer saw me and actually questioned me, and we actually talked to each other via WordPad, which was quite strange. That was very, very strange.
What did he say? What did you say?
Well, he said, "What are you doing?" Which is a bit, shocking. And I told him I was from military computer security, which he fully believed. And we had a little chat, and he tried to impress me with his virus knowledge and going into the DOS box, the console and stuff. And that was quite strange, talking to someone who's in charge of the place where you shouldn't be, and then not realising that you shouldn't have been there.
And I guess that scared you enough to stop you doing it?
No.
Why?
Because I felt like this free energy technology that I was after should be publicly available. I wasn't doing any damage. I was snooping around. I wasn't making their security poorer because the administrative password was already blank, so the door was already open. The only thing I was doing was installing my remote control program, which is commercially off-the-shelf available software, so it shouldn't be a problem either.
Did you find what you were looking for?
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
There's a group called the Disclosure Project. They published a book which had 400 expert witnesses ranging from civilian air traffic controllers through military radar operators right up to the chaps that are responsible as to whether or not to launch nuclear missiles. So some very credible, very relied upon people, all saying that yes, there's UFO technology, there's anti-gravity, there's free energy, and it is extraterrestrial in origin, and we've captured spacecraft and reverse engineered it. And these are, very solid, reliable chaps in charge of launching nuclear missiles. So,
what did you find inside NASA?
One of these people was a NASA photographic expert, and she said that in Building 8 of Johnson Space Center, they regularly airbrushed out images of UFOs from the high-res satellite imagery. And using the same blank password hunting technique, I got down to Building 8, got a few blank passwording machines there, and what she said was there. There was folders called filtered and unfiltered, or processed and raw, or something like that. I got one picture out of the folder, bearing in mind this is a 56k dial-up.
So a very slow internet connection.
Oh, crikey, yeah, dial-up days. A 235 megabyte picture, and if you're talking 5 minutes a megabyte, obviously impossible to download. Also in a NASA proprietary image format, not a GIF or a JPEG or anything. So using the remote control program, I turned the colour down to 4-bit colour, the screen resolution really, really low, and even then this picture was still, juddering and coming onto the screen. But what came onto the screen was amazing. It was a culmination of all my efforts. It was a picture of something that definitely wasn't man-made. It was above the Earth's hemisphere. It was kind of looked like a satellite. It was cigar-shaped. It had geodesic domes above, below, to the left, to the right, and both ends of. And although it was a low-resolution picture, it was very close up. This thing was hanging in space. The Earth's hemisphere was visible below it. And no rivets, no seams, none of the stuff associated with normal man-made manufacturing.
Is it possible this is an artist's impression?
I don't know. No, for me it was it was more than coincidence. I mean, this woman had said, this is what happens in this building, in this space centre. I went into that building, that space centre, and saw exactly that. And the folders were even called unprocessed and processed, or raw and filtered or something, so...
Do you have a copy of this? It came down to your machine?
No, it came... The graphical remote viewer works frame by frame. It's a Java application. So it's nothing saved on your hard drive, or at least if it is, only one frame at a time might be.
So did you get the one frame?
Nope.
What happened?
Well, once I was cut off and my picture disappeared, I was just...
You were actually cut off?
Oh, yeah.
At the time you were downloading the picture?
Yeah, I saw the guy's hand move across. And bear in mind, you're not downloading it, you're viewing it remotely. So in a way it is downloading because the picture's coming from there to yours, but you're not downloading it as a named file to your hard drive. You're viewing it through an application.
I mean, if I was to go and look for pictures that you've described, blooming sure that I could record everything that happened on my machine.
Yeah.
Was there a way to do that?
I think there probably was a screenshot function in Remotely Anywhere, which I didn't use. I mean, I'm sitting there bedazzled, you know, thinking, crikey, this really is looking weirder and weirder the more that comes of it. And also I thought that I was safe there. I didn't think I'd be caught, you know, 3/4 of the way through of looking at the first picture I'd looked at. And also I was amazed that it was how she said it would be.
So you were cut off while you were looking at this picture. A few months later you were caught. What happened on that day?
National High-Tech Crime Unit knocks on your door early in the morning. I'd been asleep for about an hour, I think. So I was very groggy.
You weren't up all night hacking,
I was, yes. But fortunately for me, they'd been monitoring me for 3 months beforehand and saw that I wasn't doing damage, that I was snooping around. So it was good in a way. Yeah, that was March 2002, and they said, oh, you might get 6 months or so community service. Next thing I know, in November 2002, 6 months has turned into 60 years in an American jail.
Why do they think that sentence is suitable for you?
They've written some new cybercrime laws, and when I was following my case and following the changes in legislation and even the minute changes made to the legislation, I'm sure my case heavily affected the new cybercrime laws in America. I think they're peeing their pants. They're incredibly scared that their computer systems are so easy to get into. And so rather than stop the bad practice and increase the security or employ proper IT people instead of training up military personnel, they're trying to scare everyone away from not doing it. So I'm the anti-hacking poster boy, you know.
That's why you think they're trying to impose such a serious sentence. Why are they saying they're imposing such a serious sentence?
They say I've damaged every machine I was on.
Is that possible?
Well, I mean, yeah, you could have done, but it wouldn't have been in my interest. I wanted to maintain a quiet presence. Also, they say that for it to be an extraditable offence, it has to be worth a year in prison. For it to be worth a year in prison, it has to be $5,000 worth of damage. And as if by magic, lo and behold, every machine I'm on is $5,000 worth of damage.
$5,000 worth of damage to each machine?
Yeah.
Is that possible? How much were those machines worth, do you think?
Well, crikey, I mean, in America, PCs are even cheaper than they are over here. I'm sure they probably cost about $500.
So these are military PCs?
Military PCs, but
so there's a good chance that
pretty
they're
low
not standard.
Well, if they weren't standard, they wouldn't have had blank passwords and been running Windows and connected to the internet.
You acknowledge that what you did was against the law. It was wrong, don't you?
Unauthorised access is against the law and is wrong.
What do you think is a suitable punishment for someone that did what you did?
Well, firstly, because of what I was looking for, I think I was morally correct, even though I regret it now. I think the free energy technology should be publicly available. I want to be tried in my own country under the Computer Misuse Act, and I want evidence brought forward, or at least want the Americans to have to provide evidence in order to extradite me, because I know there is no evidence of damage. And that is the main brunt of the charges. That's what's gone from 6 months community service to 60 years in a foreign jail.
Do you understand maybe that someone who hacks into such a high level of secure building and such a high level of secure computers, that sounds like a serious offence? You were hacking just after September the 11th, 2001, weren't you?
Well, I was hacking long before and for a while afterwards as well. So, you know.
During the immediate aftermath of 9/11?
No, not immediately. It was actually... I think that was around... I had actually stopped for a while towards the end of 2000 and started again after a few months, so I can't even remember if I was doing it at the time, but certainly not, you know, during it, because I was with everyone else watching it on television thinking, crikey.
Okay. Do you have any tips to stop hackers like yourself from getting into computers within companies or within homes?
Yeah, first of all, have a password. Don't have blank passwords. I think your first line of defence is stuff that's already part of Windows. So as well as having a good password, in the office environment you should enforce log-on, log-off hours, so no one can log on before or after office hours. Simple tweak to making the Windows security. Make sure everyone turns off the machines at night when they go home from the office, or make sure you turn off your router at night if you've got broadband and you go to bed at night. Turn off the remote registry service.
Now, let's just talk about that. Can you just talk us through what the remote registry service is and how you turn it off?
Okay. The registry is where lots of information about your computer is stored on the computer.
the remote registry service allows the remote user to remotely query your registry. The useful information it contains is stuff about your password policy, your usernames, etc., etc. And it's something that you don't need unless you're in a specific situation in an office environment. Windows XP Home has it turned off by default, but Windows XP Professional doesn't.
So Windows XP has basically a button flicked somewhere, a switch flicked somewhere that says allow remote access to my machine. And it's switched on, that facility's switched on.
It's switched on by default in Windows XP Professional, but not Windows XP Home. Yeah.
So you would advise users to go in and switch that off?
Yep. And if you search on the internet for remote registry switch off, there's plenty of guides out there, I'm sure.
Now, just also tell me about the name of the admin user. I thought that was quite interesting when you told me that on the phone.
Yeah, if people are trying to hack a Windows machine, they're after the administrator account, as I was. That's the top dog on the machine. Gives you full control of the local machine. One simple technique you can use is just to go into your users and passwords and control panel and rename the administrator. Call it, whatever your name is or whatever you like.
So hackers won't know what.
Yeah, so they'll keep trying administrator with lots of different passwords, not knowing the username's wrong, so we'll never get there.
Gary, it's been really fascinating. Thanks for your time.
No, thank you.
I think we have a question from Tom Bradbury.
Mr. President, Tom Bradbury, ITV News. Quite a lot of people in the UK feel that your determination as a country to continue to push for the extradition of computer hacker and Asperger sufferer Gary Mckinnon is disproportionate and somewhat harsh. Do you think it is time now to consider some leniency in this case? And Prime Minister, you've expressed very strong views on this matter, suggesting that Mr. Mckinnon shouldn't be extradited. Your Deputy Prime Minister has expressed even stronger views. Did you discuss that with the President today? And if not, would now be a good moment to share your views with us once again?
Shall I go?
Please, go ahead.
It is something that we discussed in our meeting. I mean, clearly there's a discussion going on between the British and the Americans about this, and I don't want to prejudice those discussions. We completely understand that Gary Mckinnon stands accused of a very important and significant crime in terms of hacking into vital databases, and nobody denies that that is an important crime that has to be considered. But I have had conversations with the US ambassador, as well as raising it today with the President about this issue, and I hope a way through can be found.
Well, one of the things that David and I discussed was the increasing challenge that we're going to face as a consequence of the Internet and the need for us to cooperate extensively on issues of cybersecurity. We had a brief discussion about the fact that although there may still be efforts to send in spies and try to obtain state secrets through traditional Cold War methods, the truth of the matter is these days where we're going to see enormous amounts of vulnerability when it comes to information is going to be through these kind of breaches in our information systems. So we take this very seriously, and I know that the British government does as well. Beyond that, one of the traditions we have is the President doesn't get involved in decisions around prosecutions, extradition matters. So what I expect is that my team will follow the law, but they will also coordinate closely with what we've just stated is an ally that is unparalleled in terms of our cooperative relationship. And I trust that this will get resolved in a way that underscores the seriousness of the issue, but also underscores the fact that we work together and we can find an appropriate solution. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
We'll turn first to Mr. Mckinnon's case. I should explain to the House that the statutory process under the Extradition Act 2003 has long ended. Since I came into office, the sole issue on which I have been required to make a decision is whether Mr. Mckinnon's extradition to the United States would breach his human rights. Mr. Mckinnon is accused of serious crimes, but there is also no doubt that he is seriously ill. He has Asperger's syndrome and suffers from depressive illness. The legal question before me is now whether the extent of that illness is sufficient to preclude extradition. As the House would expect, I have very carefully considered the representations made on Mr Mckinnon's behalf, including from a number of clinicians. I have obtained my own medical advice from practitioners recommended to me by the Chief Medical Officer, and I have taken extensive legal advice. After careful consideration of all of the relevant material, I have concluded that Mr Mckinnon's extradition would give rise to such a high risk of him ending his life that a decision to extradite would be incompatible with Mr Mckinnon's human rights. I have therefore withdrawn the extradition order against Mr Mckinnon. It will now be for the Director of Public Prosecutions to decide whether Mr Mckinnon has a case to answer in a UK court. This has been a difficult and exceptional case, and I would like to pay tribute to all of the Home Office officials and lawyers who have worked on this case over the years.